Family said I failed, but they were shocked when I was sent to Iran as a captain on a special mission. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper when I told him I'd been promoted. He just muttered, "Promoted to what? Paper pusher?" My mother glanced at me like I was speaking a foreign language, maybe because to them, I always had. To them, I was the emotional one, the burden, the mistake who didn't go to med school, didn't marry well, didn't fit. My sister was the pride, the picture-perfect wife of a decorated colonel, mother of 3, always center frame at Christmas. Me? I was the photo they never hung. They told me I was reckless, too soft, too angry, that I'd never survive in uniform. "You're not leadership material, Eliza," my dad once spat. "You're barely even military." And when I made it through selection, through Black Ops training, through the mission that nearly killed me in Kabul, they still said nothing. Not even when Sam died beside me. Not even when I returned stateside with half his dog tags and a chest full of shrapnel. So when I got the orders for Tehran, top clearance, shadow directive, liaison to the Joint Interagency Task Force, I didn't tell them. Not a word. I packed my gear in silence, because there's no point in shouting into a room that never listened. But what I didn't expect was what they'd do when they finally found out. And how they found out? Well, that's the part no one saw coming. I'm Eliza Hartman, and this is the story of how I went from the black sheep of my family to the ghost they couldn't ignore. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say "listening" in the comments, or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes, even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. If my words touch something in you, don't forget to subscribe, because stories like mine don't always make the headlines, but they deserve to be heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. It was Thanksgiving, 2012. The first snow had begun falling outside our cabin windows, blanketing the mountain ridges of Montana in soft white. Inside, the scent of roast turkey filled the air. The table was set just like every year: stuffing, cranberry sauce, corn casserole, each dish sitting in its designated place, like obedient soldiers in formation. The fire crackled low. Laughter chimed in from Sarah and her cousins. Clinks of silverware echoed across the room. But to me, it all felt like a carefully rehearsed lie. I sat at the edge of the long oak table, fingers curled tight around the cloth napkin in my lap. My hair was pulled into a high knot, face bare, back straight like I'd practiced. Not in any class, but in life. I was 22, home from college with a secret packed in my chest like dynamite. And when I finally said it, when I told them I'd withdrawn from architecture school and enlisted in the army, it wasn't a bomb. It was silence. Until my father spoke. "You're the biggest disappointment I've ever raised," he said. "The army? You think you're built for anything other than wasting your future?" Every eye turned toward me. Sarah tightened her grip on Mom's hand, the way she always did when things got tense. Mom didn't defend me. She just sighed and gently slid another spoonful of mashed potatoes onto my plate, like if she fed me enough, I'd change my mind. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out an old photo. I laid it carefully on the table in front of him. It was a picture of me and Dad at the shooting range when I was 9. He'd taught me how to brace my shoulders and look fear in the eye. We were both smiling in that photo. "I kept it," I said softly, "because I thought you were proud of me." Then I stood up, walked out without saying goodbye, and headed toward the truck I had parked near the shed, my packed military duffel already in the back, zipped shut. The cold air bit at my cheeks as I crossed the yard, but I wasn't shaking. I had done the only thing that scared me more than war, walking away from home without permission. While grabbing my bag, I noticed the old storage cabinet slightly ajar. Something inside caught my eye. A leather-bound notebook with frayed edges. I opened it out of instinct. Inside, in the sharp, deliberate handwriting I knew too well, were these words. I lost a soldier in 1989. A girl. They all said she wouldn't survive basic. She died proving she could. I swore I'd never let my daughter walk into that same fire. I stared at the page for a long time, not with anger, but with something closer to sorrow. Maybe he wasn't trying to control me. Maybe he was just afraid I'd die like the girl he couldn't save. Later, at a highway rest stop somewhere near the Idaho border, I checked my phone. One new email, Sam Carter. We'd been in shop class together in high school. Now he was a training sergeant at Fort Bragg. Heard you're enlisting. Don't let anyone make your path smaller than it should be. Go straight into the advanced program. You've got the mind for it. We need that kind of soldier. I wrote back just one line. See you at Bragg. I sat there in the fluorescent hum of the diner, alone, and pulled my reflection into view in the bathroom mirror. I tied my hair back tighter, pulled the folded tuition bill from my coat, tore it into neat pieces, and dropped it in the trash. When I looked up, I didn't see a daughter or a student or a failure. I saw a soldier, still unproven, still unknown. But certain of one thing, I wasn't turning back. The morning I arrived at Fort Bragg, the sun was so harsh it made the pavement shimmer like glass. The air was brittle with cold, and the clang of metal on metal echoed from every corner of the training grounds. Steel boots, shouted commands, barked discipline. It all hit like a drumline I hadn't rehearsed for. I stepped off the bus with my duffel slung across one shoulder, the other women's seats on that ride all empty. Turns out I was the only woman in my unit. I could feel the stares before I heard the murmurs. A couple of guys didn't bother to whisper. Must have lost a bet, one muttered. Another snickered. Hope she packed a blow-dryer. But then I saw Sam. Same square jaw from high school, same steady eyes, only now backed by the authority of a staff sergeant. He didn't smile when he saw me, but he nodded. Once, short and sharp. Respectful. Neutral. Braxton, he said. You ready to do the work? I nodded. Always. Day 4 brought the night navigation course. They split us into groups of 3, dropped us miles apart in the woods, gave us a busted compass and a flashlight with half-life batteries. Find your way to checkpoint Delta. No GPS. No whining. My team had 2 guys who'd been watching me like I was the class pet. Amused, but disposable. They, accidentally, marked the wrong grid on our map. When I pointed it out, they brushed me off. We've got this, sweetheart. So I followed. Let them lead us straight into a ditch and 3 hours of going in circles. When I finally took the map back, I corrected the grid, redirected us, and found the trail markers. Then, 20 minutes from Delta, I heard a faint rustle. One of the guys had fallen behind. He'd twisted his ankle in a ravine. I looped back, pulled him up over my shoulder, and got us all to checkpoint with 9 minutes left. The next morning, I was summoned to the quiet room. Most recruits didn't even know it existed. An unmarked room in the admin wing, dim lights, one steel desk, a mirror that wasn't a mirror. They told me to sit, then slid a dossier across the table. A hostage scenario in Iran, high-value intel, one shot to stop a bloodbath. Walk us through your plan, the officer said. I didn't hesitate. I switched from English to Farsi mid-analysis, outlined how I'd make contact, who I'd bribe, how I'd decode the location from a dialectal slip in the transcript. By the time I finished, the room was dead silent. Then a quiet, "Thank you." Dismissed. I later learned not everyone was impressed for the right reasons. Captain Derek Walsh had watched the feed. "She's good," he told another officer. "Too good. Don't add her to the top performers file. Let her sit in the shadows. When I need a ghost, I'll pull her." I didn't hear those words, but Sam passed by the hallway when Walsh said them and paused just long enough to catch the tone. Coiled, calculating. He didn't tell me. Not yet. But something in his face shifted when he saw me at dinner that night. A week later, I was tapped for the Monterey language program, Farsi immersion, diplomatic strategy, and covert negotiation training. As I folded my things, I reached into the bottom of my duffel and pulled out my father's old notebook. I found the page again. Her name hadn't been written, just, "A girl I lost." I copied that sentence on a strip of paper and tucked it inside my uniform shirt, just above the left breast pocket. Some people wear dog tags. I carried grief and promise over my heart. 2 years had passed since the snow-covered night I left Montana. I came back not as the girl with a duffel bag and a broken heart, but as a woman who'd learned to navigate darkness, literal and metaphorical. Sarah's wedding was held at a luxurious mountain resort just outside Helena. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, linen so crisp you could hear it wrinkle. My mother insisted on black tie, but I wore a simple black sheath dress and pulled my hair into a low bun. No jewelry, no statement, just presence. People stared when I walked in, but not for long. I wasn't the spectacle they expected. I wasn't loud or decorated. I was quiet, measured, and no one really knew what to make of that. During introductions, relatives awkwardly skipped over what I did. One of Sarah's sorority sisters asked, "So, are you still doing something with languages?" My mother smiled quickly and answered for me. "Oh, Eliza does. Something in translation. Government adjacent." Then she steered the conversation toward hors d'oeuvres. Sarah was radiant. Younger than me by 2 years, but always had that effortless charm I never mastered. She introduced her fiancé, Thomas Reed, with pride. "He works with a firm that does contracting with NSA," she said, squeezing his hand. He was polite, polished, blue suit, easy grin. He looked at me a bit too long, like he was trying to place something, or hide something. Later that night, I wandered toward the bridal suite to drop off Sarah's gift, a hand-bound photo album I made from our childhood road trips. The hallway was dim, music from the reception still pulsing below. That's when I heard it. Thomas's voice through a cracked door, speaking low, urgent, in Farsi. "We move them through the east corridor. Keep the red crescent silent." I stopped breathing. It wasn't just the language. It was the context, the phrasing, the weight of it. I stepped back quietly before he noticed. My hands were trembling as I returned to the ballroom. My father found me at the edge of the patio, nursing a glass of water. His face was flushed. He never handled scotch well. "I heard you made it through Monterey," he slurred. "Didn't think you had it in you. Not really your world, Eliza. Battlefield's no place for a girl." Then, softer, almost breaking. "Not for my girl." I looked at him, really looked, and I saw regret twisted into the lines of his face, but I didn't say a word. Just nodded once and walked away. The next morning, before the ceremony, I slipped out. No goodbye, no note. Back at the base, I didn't waste time. I reached out to a former classmate from Monterey who now worked cyber intel for the NSA. The name Thomas Reed pulled up faster than I expected, on a soft list. Not public, not charged, but flagged for potential ties to an arms channel stretching from northern Africa to western Iran. I requested temporary surveillance clearance. It wasn't official, but it was something. I still had the strip of paper tucked above my heart, the one with my father's scribbled guilt about a girl who died unseen. Now, I wondered if another silence might get someone else killed, and this time, I wouldn't wait for permission to speak. The call came at 2:14 a.m. Sharp. I was awake, sitting cross-legged on my bunk, reviewing an old Farsi lexicon when the phone lit up with a restricted number. I answered without hesitation. Braxton. The voice on the other end was familiar. Steady, low, with the quiet grit of someone who'd seen too much and learned to say very little. Lieutenant Braxton, this is Lieutenant Colonel Monroe, Iran. 3 missing. 1 confirmed U.S. civilian. You've been selected. I didn't ask why. I already knew. The mission briefing landed in my inbox 20 minutes later. The target. A remote stretch near the Sistan-Baluchistan border, where a humanitarian outpost, one with supposed links to the Red Crescent, was suspected of doubling as a front for arms trafficking and abductions. Intel suggested the operation was leveraging refugee flow to hide military-grade equipment. Our task was to infiltrate and extract evidence, quietly, efficiently, and without leaving diplomatic wreckage behind. I was the only operative fluent in Farsi, Pashto, and Arabic. My file had no formal combat record, no ribbons, no photos, just redacted lines and a reputation for results. They wanted someone invisible. I was perfect. What I didn't expect, what punched the air from my lungs, was seeing Lila Nguyen walk into the prep room that morning. Lila, my roommate from Monterey, sharp as acid and twice as biting, now a comms specialist trained in high-level signal interference. We embraced, stiffly but honestly. "Still wear your hair like a combat boot ad," she muttered. I smiled. "Still drink black coffee like it owes you something?" We were assigned to work together, posing as 2 outreach coordinators from Green Roots, a real enough NGO whose paperwork we now wore like armor. No uniforms, no insignias, just forged IDs and a lifetime of unsaid things between us. Before wheels up, Sam pulled me aside in the hangar's shadowed corner. His face was unreadable, but his hands clenched around a sealed folder. "Take this. It was decrypted last night. Secure channel from Ramstein. Thomas Reed has been moving military documents. Real-time GPS logs place him within 20 clicks of the last known location of those missing journalists." I opened the file. It was worse than I feared. Transaction codes, call logs, aliases, one of which had surfaced on an arms manifest 3 days ago in Sistan. The web was real, and it ran deeper than we knew. As I prepped gear and double-checked logistics, a red flag caught my eye. In the base's encrypted archive, I found 2 versions of the mission's route map. One clean, the other subtly altered. Modified corridors, rerouted checkpoints. Whoever did this wanted operatives to walk into dead zones. The last modification? Captain Derek Walsh. The same man who once said I should be left off the records, filed under expendable asset. I filed an official inquiry. Within an hour, I was summoned. The warning came crisp and cold. "Your assignment is external. Do not pursue internal investigations while deployed. Stay focused, Lieutenant." In other words, back off. Someone up top was protecting Walsh, or using him. As our flight to Iran took off, I sat in silence, clutching the small notebook I carried everywhere, the one with my father's scrawled confession tucked beneath the fabric liner. I didn't need orders to know what I had to do. There were enemies outside the wire, yes. But the ones inside? They wore our uniforms, and some of them shared our blood. The desert wasn't quiet. People who'd never stepped foot in it romanticized the silence, but it was never truly still. The wind scraped endlessly over the sand like whispers arguing in 1,000 languages, and somewhere beneath it all, the tension of something waiting. That's what I felt when Lila and I stepped into the refugee encampment straddling the Iran-Pakistan border, the one that wasn't on any official map. We were dressed in the muted greens and faded scarves of field medics, our forged IDs declaring us part of a humanitarian outfit offering emergency triage to displaced families. But this wasn't a mission of mercy. It was a hunt. And we were already bleeding intel before we knew we were wounded. We were introduced to Rahim, a local cleric and regional guide. He was lean, with sun-darkened skin and a voice that spoke in half poetry, half code. When he heard my last name, his eyes flickered. "Noor once spoke of you," he said, his fingers grazing the edge of his robes before producing a folded strip of fabric, a piece of a scarf, frayed, with a faded emblem in the corner. Red Crescent, S12. My throat tightened. I recognized the stitching. Noor's scarf. The same one she gave me years ago in Mosul when a bullet missed my spine by inches and she whispered, "Keep this near your heart." The fabric was torn now. A message. A warning. A plea. That night, we observed a caravan of vehicles snaking across the dunes under moonless sky. No headlights, no sound but wind. From a distance I caught it. 3 brief flashes in the sky. Signal from a French drone. Recognition. Support. I tried to transmit our coordinates using the secure band, but nothing transmitted. Lila pulled off her headset. "We're locked out," she said grimly. "Someone's jamming us, from our side." The next morning, Rahim said a few of the elders had agreed to speak to us. But as we stepped past the tents, everything felt wrong. Too still, too perfect. And then it happened. A deafening crack split the air, followed by concussive blasts that flung bodies and canvas skyward. I saw Lila hit the ground, blood blooming on her shoulder. I turned, shouting for Rahim, but he'd already fallen, hands stretched in prayer or warning, I couldn't tell. Then darkness swallowed me. I woke to the sting of salt and rust. A dim light bulb swung overhead in a cell that smelled of rot and betrayal. Footsteps approached, deliberate, and then I saw him. Captain Derek Walsh, no longer in uniform but very much in command, standing beside a man I recognized instantly, Carter, a former logistics officer dishonorably discharged, now a mercenary with a known price and no loyalties. "You could have made this easy," Walsh said, as if I were a child who'd refused to play nice. "We needed someone like you, invisible, smart, useful. But you wanted to play hero." His words curdled something in me. They had used my file, my skill set to build operations off-grid. They wanted me to be a pawn. And when I wouldn't play, they planned to erase me entirely. They underestimated one thing: Noor's scarf. I had tied it around my wrist before the ambush, but now I loosened it and threaded it through the cell window's narrow vent. Visible from above. Barely. But enough. Enough for trained eyes to spot. I tapped it against the metal twice. Paused. Then once. SOS, in the simplest form. The rescue came like thunder. Explosions tore through the compound, gunfire lighting up the corridors in rapid succession. I clawed my way out of the cell, dizzy and bruised, as Boots stormed past me, and then I saw him. Sam. He wasn't supposed to be there, but of course he was. He must have followed the trail on his own, refused the order to stand down. He shoved me through the breach, covering my escape with return fire. "Go!" he barked. I didn't make it more than 20 yards before I heard the shot. A single one. Clean. Deadly. I turned back. But I knew. I knew from the silence that followed. That night, as we lifted off in the evac chopper, Lila unconscious beside me, I held Noor's scarf in one hand and Sam's dog tag in the other. They had turned me into bait. They'd killed a man who trusted me. And now they'd see what happened when the Forgotten fought back with nothing left to lose. When the C-17 touched down at Andrews, I was no longer the soldier who'd left. The official paperwork said I was back under psychological recovery protocol, another euphemism in a long line of bureaucratic fig leaves. But the truth was more dangerous and far more fragile. Under a special NSA directive, I was granted silent leave to investigate the very rot that had nearly gotten me killed. My cover was my trauma. My weapon was what Sam left behind. They handed me a sealed briefcase before I left the medevac unit. Military issue, double-locked with a digital code. The text didn't know what it contained. But I did. Sam had pressed it into my hand seconds before the French team pulled me out of that compound. "You'll know how to open it," he'd whispered, barely conscious, blood pooling beneath him. I did. His daughter's birthday, March 3rd, 2014. Sam never forgot a date when it came to family. He trusted me with hers more than he trusted his own command. Inside the briefcase was a slim SSD drive and a note scribbled in field shorthand. Coordinates, timestamps, nicknames: Carter, Walsh, Thomas. Transactions traced through a web of shell companies and dummy humanitarian orgs. And tucked deep in the ledger, an account pinging back to Bozeman, Montana. Thomas's town. The same ZIP code as the front company he listed as Defense Consulting. The one Sarah once bragged about during dinner, saying, "It's all above board." I didn't report it up the chain. Not yet. I sent the entire drive to someone I trusted even more, Rosa Lang, a hard-nosed military lawyer who once shared a foxhole with Sam in Kandahar and now operated independently under the Internal Conduct Oversight Division. She didn't ask questions, just replied, "Under review. Keep eyes open." But that wasn't enough. I wanted Thomas to squirm. I needed the world to start watching him the way he once watched people disappear. So I created a shell persona, Lexi Tanners, freelance investigative journalist, and secured a press badge for a defense expo in Colorado Springs. Thomas was on the panel discussing innovation in tactical logistics. Irony had never been more poetic. He walked in wearing a slate gray suit, smug as ever, flanked by his handlers and two polished PR aides. The room held maybe 60 people, industry types, board analysts, a few contractors. But none of them mattered. My camera was already rolling. When the moderator asked for questions, I raised my hand first. "Mr. Reed," I said, voice steady, "can you explain why your name appears on Cargo Manifest S12, linked to a shipment that resulted in the deaths of 3 humanitarian workers in the Sistan corridor?" The room stilled. His face blanched, then flickered. "I don't know what your documents suggest. Your company facilitated that shipment using defense funds funneled through green routes. You signed off." That was it. He walked out. No denial, no rebuttal. Just silence wrapped in panic. I clipped the footage and sent it anonymously to Eyes Front, a whistleblower media collective with a history of dragging classified skeletons into the sunlight. Within hours, the clip was trending on encrypted channels, titled, "Defense Consultant Walks Out After War Crimes Question." And then, the final blow came from closer to home. My father called. His voice was rough, thick with something halfway between fury and regret. "Eliza, if you keep doing this, if you keep digging, we're done. You hear me? We're not family anymore." I could have shouted. I could have cried. Instead, I let the silence breathe for a moment before I answered. "We haven't been family since the day you said I was your greatest mistake. I'm not digging to destroy us. I'm digging to find what you were too afraid to face." He hung up without another word. That night, alone in my apartment, I stared at the wall where I had tacked photos, red string, and pins, a makeshift map of betrayal. But now, the pieces were coming together. I wasn't cornered anymore. I was setting the trap. They'd opened Sam's briefcase thinking it would die with him. But they underestimated the woman he handed it to. And now I was coming for all of them. Not with guns, with proof, with light. To the world, I was done, retired, disgraced. Another soldier who cracked under pressure and vanished into a life of anonymity. The official documents marked my status as unfit for further service due to psychological trauma. I played my part well, moved into a dusty one-road town in Montana, rented out an old garage, and started fixing engines. People left me alone, and I let them. But behind every oil-stained hoodie and wrench was Operation Blind Horizon, a mission authorized in shadows by NSA's deep internal directive. A mission built on deception, risk, and the kind of sacrifice no commendation ever covers. It didn't take long. Thomas arrived like clockwork, looking smug in that pressed-collared arrogance he wore like armor. "Still playing soldier in the shadows?" he sneered. "Or are you finally just another failure?" I handed him a USB with a faint smile. "Depends on who's writing the story, doesn't it?" The drive was a decoy, loaded with what looked like classified weapons routes, labeled S-12 red, enough to bait a man like him into believing he'd scored leverage. He left without asking another question. He always thought I was reckless, emotional, easy to predict. He gave the drive to Carter. Carter, ever the errand dog, passed it to Walsh. That handoff, recorded, time-stamped, and monitored by a black team buried so deep even Congress hadn't heard of them. Sierra Ghost. Embedded inside that dummy file was a GPS-triggered signal. The second Walsh opened it at what he believed was a secure location near Ankara, the tag lit up. Drones circled, doors were breached. Rosa Lang led the takedown herself, storming into the safe house with a team of operatives and an arrest warrant bearing 12 federal charges, spanning from military fraud to conspiracy to commit international arms trafficking. But Thomas wasn't there. He'd left exactly 3 hours prior. No trace, just another hole in the web. Another betrayal. Someone tipped him off. Again. Later that night, I sat in my garage staring at the grease-stained wall behind the workbench. Names, connections, dotted lines, arrows that used to point to Walsh now redirected further up. A new direction. Whoever warned Thomas wasn't some rogue informant. This was coming from the top. Department of Defense? NSA itself? Someone who knew the playbook because they helped write it. Walsh was a puppet. Thomas, a tactician. But now I was looking for the architect. For a moment, I thought of Sam. How he died believing we could dig our way to light if we just kept moving forward. He'd built the trap, but I'd sprung it too late. We'd peeled back one mask only to find another underneath. I was no longer playing catch-up. I was running toward the fire with my eyes wide open. And the only way forward now was Tehran. The air in Tehran that night was dense. No moon, just black velvet sky above the consulate's courtyard. I stepped through the side gate flanked by 2 Air Force attachés whose names I didn't bother to ask. My new identity was bland on paper. Civilian security advisor embedded with a humanitarian liaison team. But my purpose cut deeper. I was there to end this. Not quietly, not cleanly, but truthfully. Inside the consulate conference room, the tension snapped as soon as Thomas walked in. He wore a pale gray suit, polished cufflinks, and the kind of smile that knew where every camera was pointed. "Captain Braxton," he said smoothly, not missing a beat. "Still don't know when to quit, do you?" I didn't answer. I just reached over to the projector console and hit play. On screen, grainy footage rolled from the compound near the Pakistan border. Carter's voice filled the room. Thomas's orders echoed behind him, his words casual, chilling. "Don't worry, if they die on the wrong side of the border, they're just statistics." A hush fell. Someone from the Iranian delegation stood and stepped out. Another figure, a silent Interpol agent seated in the back, gave a subtle nod. Thomas shifted in his chair, calculating. Then came his countermove. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. Inside was a classified report, an official memo confirming that years ago, I had helped Noor escape from a contested zone against direct orders. "You want to bring me down?" he said, eyes locking onto mine. "Fine, but you're coming with me." My chest didn't tighten. My hand didn't shake. I knew this would be a knife fight with no clean winner, but I wasn't done. I looked toward the NSA rep who had been silently observing from the corner. Without a word, he laid a thin file onto the table. Inside, the autopsy of Sam. Cause of death? Shot from behind. 3 meters. Not enemy fire. A suppressed round from a U.S. service weapon. Fired by Carter. Authorized by Thomas. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. But my fists clenched on the table's edge. "So, it was never about strategy," I said, voice low. "It was always just about silence." Then I made my final move. I pulled a slim USB from my pocket, embedded with a timed transfer protocol. Moments before I entered the consulate, it had released its payload: video, documents, audio, all of it to eyes front. Across the globe, screens lit up. Exclusive. The Hidden War. U.S. private contractors and weapon laundering in Iran. The TV in the outer hall flickered. Images rolled. Voices gasped. Security moved. Thomas lunged, shouting something I didn't care to hear. Within seconds, agents escorted him out, still shouting, still trying to spin the narrative. No one was listening. I stood in that room, the air crackling around me. I wasn't victorious. I wasn't triumphant. I was just emptied, hollowed by years of running, lying, and losing the only people who ever mattered. As the Interpol official passed me at the threshold, he paused and said quietly, "Sometimes the bravest soldiers aren't in uniform when they change the world." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just nodded. Because I knew this wasn't the end. It was simply a new kind of war. One fought not with bullets, but with truth. Returning to American soil was nothing like the movies. No jets overhead, no salutes, no one waiting with a folded flag or tears. I was driven from the airbase in an unmarked SUV, dropped off in D.C. before sunrise, and told quietly, "This never happened." Thomas was now an international fugitive. Carter and Walsh had both been indicted under sealed orders. But me? I was still officially a disgraced officer, dishonorably separated for internal violations. I'd expose them, yes, but exposure doesn't equal redemption, not in the eyes of those who wrote the rules. Days passed. I stayed invisible, moving through the city like a ghost. Then, one morning, an envelope arrived with a European stamp and no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a note. "We can't give you a parade, but we can give you proof." Signed with the initials of the Interpol agent who had whispered to me in Tehran. Attached was a scan, an original signed order by Thomas authorizing 3 shipments of unregistered weapons, traced directly to U.S. military stock. The same paperwork that had mysteriously vanished before the hearings. Recovered. Verified. Weeks later, I received an invitation. It didn't come through channels. It was handwritten, hand-delivered. Veterans Roundtable, Old War Department Building. I almost didn't go, but something in me needed to. The room was small, just 6 chairs and the faint smell of coffee and forgotten bureaucracy. Rosa Lang sat quietly in one corner. Across from her, Lieutenant Colonel Monroe gave a slight nod. Then, a woman with silver hair stepped in, civilian clothes, but posture sharp as a blade. "We don't do this for recognition," she said, placing a wooden box on the table. "But some medals are carried in silence." Inside was a replica of the Distinguished Service Medal. No name, no engraving. Just the weight of what had been done. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Your father didn't say anything, but he watched your interview. He placed your photo in uniform on Grandpa's mantle. I didn't reply. I couldn't. But I stared at that message for a long time. My eyes didn't tear. My body didn't tremble. Just a quiet ache rising from somewhere deeper than memory. Maybe forgiveness doesn't arrive with an apology. Maybe it's just being seen. Finally. Silently. The mornings in Monterey came with fog and salt air. Gentle, constant, grounding. I'd rented a small cabin not far from the Defense Language Institute, where I taught survival techniques and Farsi to new recruits. I didn't wear a uniform anymore, but part of me still moved like I did. Alert, precise, quiet. I wasn't anyone official now. Just a woman with too many stories and a voice low enough for only the willing to hear. I no longer wore the uniform, but some things stay stitched under the skin. One morning, my mailbox held something unusual. A letter. Not official. Not digital. Handwritten in firm, aging strokes. I still can't say I was right, but I know I was wrong. If you'd let me, I'd like to salute you as a fellow soldier. It was signed by my father. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just folded the letter and held it in my hand for a long, silent minute. Weeks later, I flew to Montana. No press. No announcement. It was my father's 70th birthday. I didn't bring gifts. Only 3 things. A photo of us from when I was a girl, his arm around my shoulder in front of the barn. The scarf Noor had left with me, and the unnamed medal in a plain wooden box. His house hadn't changed. Neither had the wooden steps that creaked like old bones as I climbed them. He opened the door before I could knock. We didn't speak. He didn't reach to hug me. Instead, he stood straight. Stiffer than I'd seen him in years. And then, quietly, he raised his hand to his brow in a formal salute. Eyes forward. No words. I returned the salute. My hand didn't shake. My heart didn't break. It just stilled. That was all I needed. Not words. Just to be saluted. As me. Back in Monterey, my room is simple. No plaques, no medals on the wall. But on my desk sit 3 objects. A photo. A reminder of memory and the fragile threads of family. A scarf. A symbol of mercy. Of those I protected who had no names left to speak for them. And the medal. No name engraved, yet heavy with purpose. I fought for the ones who couldn't. I stood when no one else would. And when the world finally turned to look, I had already learned to stand tall even in their silence. Some battles are never seen, some victories are never named. But the quiet strength to stand for what's right, especially when no one is watching, that's the kind that truly endures. In a world that often forgets its quiet fighters, may we never forget to honor our own voice, our own truth, and our own fight for light amidst the shadows. If this story moved something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, share your reflections, or simply say, I'm here. And if you'd like to walk with me through more untold truths, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay close. Thank you.